शन्नो मित्रः शं वरुणः शन्नो भवत्वर्यमा शन्न इन्द्रो बृहस्पतिः शन्नो विष्णुरुक्रमः नमो ब्रह्मणे नमस्ते वायो त्वमेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्मासि त्वामेव प्रत्यक्षं ब्रह्म वदिष्यामि ऋतं वदिष्यामि सत्यं वदिष्यामि तन्मामवतु तद्वक्तारमवतु अवतु माम् अवतु वक्तारम् ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावः ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ यश्छन्दसां वृषभो विश्वरूपः छन्दोभ्योऽध्यमृतात् सम्बभूव समेन्द्रो मेधया स्पृणोतु अमृतस्य देवधारणो भूयासं शरीरं मे विचर्षणं जिह्वा मे मधुमत्तमा कर्णाभ्यां भूरिविश्रुवं ब्रह्मणः कोशोऽसि मेधया पिहितः श्रुतं मे गोपाय ॐ शान्तिः 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 ॐ अहं वृक्षस्य रेरिवा कीर्तिः पृष्ठं गिरेरिव ऊर्ध्व-पवित्रो vājinīva svamṛtamस्मि द्रविणं savarcasam Sumedhā amṛtokṣitaḥ इति triśaṅkor vedānuvacanam ॐ शान्तिः 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 So the last two steps mentioned by sage Triśaṅku, which we were discussing in our previous sessions, Draviṇaṁ savarcasam, I am a shining treasure, I have acquired the shining treasure of knowledge of this oneness with the universe. So I have acquired this shining treasure, and this has resulted in me becoming Sumedhā. Sumedhā, which means the one with a beautiful intellect. The first one is more scholarly knowledge, knowledge of the self received from the masters, from their teachings, by listening and critically analyzing their teachings about the self. It's that kind of knowledge. And the beautiful intellect, Sumedhā, is the word that Patanjali also uses towards the end of the second chapter. A slightly different word, but the meaning is the same, prajña, which is the same in Buddhism also, pañña, the deep, meditative insight, experiential wisdom. So I have acquired that. And this is, when I was explaining it in my previous class, what I said was that it is an insight into the very essence of everything that exists. And that is what gives omniscience in the understanding of Advaita Vedanta. Omniscience, the capability, the capacity to know everything, means, in the context of Vedanta, it simply means to know the essence of everything. The examples that I provided which come, in fact, in the Upanishads themselves, that if someone has understood a lump of clay, he has understood everything made out of clay. If someone has understood a lump of gold, then he has understood everything made out of gold, because he has understood the very essence. Those different names and forms which we give to the various shapes, they are momentary existence. The essence is this, the lump of gold or the lump of clay. That is the essence. Someone who has understood that has understood everything. So omniscience is to be understood in this sense. And when he says, I'm the one with a beautiful intellect, this is what he means. But now comes a problem. When you have used soap to wash away all the dirt from your hands, it's a wonderful, we can call it a tool, an instrument to clean our hands. But then one also has to get rid of that soap. And for that we have water. Then one also has to get rid of that water. We have to dry away even that water. And that is when our hands then become completely natural, clean. So soap has to be used and it has to be washed away. Water has to be used and that too has to be dried out. The question is, then why? Why should I use water and soap why should I use soap if I just have to wash it away? That is the kind of question when people ask that if I need to transcend knowledge, then why should I accumulate it? But this is now what we are going to discuss, because now knowledge as well as wisdom both have been mentioned. Now comes the next stage of washing away the soap, drying away the water, so that the hand can reach back its natural, clean state of being. So prajña, even the deepest insight, Sumedhā, this beautiful intellect, prajña, which Patanjali speaks of, that is just a step. If it's the final goal, it is still the penultimate final goal. It is not the ultimate final goal. The ultimate final goal is even a step further. And that too has to be mentioned, so that we have a understanding that at some point in life, all accumulated scripturally knowledge, which is like soap, And then even deep insight, experiential insight, which is still on the level of the mind, which is still a mental state, which is still some action happening within the mind. It's still not complete peace. It is still not complete being. It is still experiencing that being, but not fully being that being. So even that has to be transcended. When it comes, Patanjali makes it very clear. For him, he speaks of two types of detachment. One is detachment. Detachment, I'm just using the English word because his word, his Sanskrit word, if very literally translated, means decolorization. Not to be colored by something, not to get colored by something. That is his word, which we translate as detachment. For him, the highest form of detachment is detachment even from this prajna, which is still a state of sattva-guna, the quality of light. But it is still a state of the mind. It is a very highly elevated state, but it is still a state of the mind. So when a person uses, you see, to raise beyond tamoguna, the quality of inertia, laziness, one has to be very active. Movement is required. And then to transcend hyperaction, a very active stillness is required. That is what sattva guna is about, the quality of light. But then even that, the third one which helped us to transcend everything, even that has to be transcended, not to be attached even to that. Because if we become attached to that, then again we have lost the purpose, we have lost the goal. So the masters repeatedly, whether it is Patanjali in the first chapter, when he speaks of the very last state of samadhi, which he mentions in the last sutra of the chapter, for him, the means to achieve that final stage is to cultivate detachment towards prajna, towards deep meditative insight. And so this is something that the masters, also in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 14th chapter, where Krishna speaks about various kinds of bondages, he says that sattva guna, the quality of light, binds us by making us attached to knowledge. Knowledge is like wealth. We work hard to achieve it, and anything that is a result of our hard work, we are deeply attached to that. And yet at some point, everything has to be left. If we don't leave it, if we don't detach ourselves, the moment of death, we have to depart from all our accumulated information, knowledge, insight, everything that has been accumulated on the mental level has to be left. So to experience that essential nature as it is in the absence of even those deep insights, that is the goal of the very final goal of the yogis, of the Vedic masters. That's why again and again in their teachings, for example, when we study the Upanishads, which scripture will say that once you have drawn out the essence, throw away the text completely. The word that has been used there, asheshataha, don't retain even a little bit. Throw it away, abandon it, renounce it completely, like a chaff, that husk of a grain is thrown away after the grain has been removed. So these texts are only meaningful as long as they have a grain of truth in them. Once that grain of truth has been grasped, then throwing away these texts is what becomes the next step, what becomes very important. Otherwise, we start, see what happens when we become attached to these texts. We see this. The moment we get attached to a teaching, we start identifying with it, and with identification comes hatred, fear, and all these, again, the traps of ignorance: ego, attachment, fear, and hatred. Hatred and fear. These 4 children of ignorance, we again fall back into that. That is why, or another example that the Upanishadic masters also give is that, like you carry a torch, the Sanskrit word ulka has the same meaning which the original word torch had. Torch, that which you, not this torch which we have, with the fire, yes. That is ulka in Sanskrit, that is called ulka. And like once at night we have reached our destination, we don't need to carry the torch anymore with us. Then it has become redundant, because then we just leave it outside at the door and we enter without it. Earlier, if people had houses made of straw, it could actually set it on fire. So that's why it had to be left behind. And that's what these torches are doing today in our world. And that is why, sadly, either the world seems to be divided in these 2 groups. One group is so deeply attached to these torches that they are ready to kill or get killed for these torches. And then there is another group who, without understanding, because of their behavior, starts to hate and dislike and blame these torches. I would say both of them are ignorant, because the torch is an instrument, it is a tool, it should be used for a purpose, and beyond that it becomes meaningless. And this tendency is not the tendency of any particular group, but it is a tendency of every religion, of every group. The moment this group mentality comes, this tendency arises. In some groups, historically it was greater. In some groups, it is greater today. In some groups, it is a little bit less. But the moment we start creating groups, such mentalities come, and these mentalities have to be abandoned. So the purpose of these texts is to reach the inner center, and once that inner center has been reached, then they become meaningless. Then they have no purpose at all. That is why, for a scholar, particularly for a scholar, there is this great fear that his knowledge, his accumulated information can become a trap. And let me here make clear that anything can become a trap. Anything that strengthens our identification with something different from ourselves, from our true nature, anything that strengthens such kind of identification, anything that strengthens our ego, our ahankara, as in we call it in Vedanta, in Patanjali's words, anything that strengthens our asmita, and therefore leads to attachment and hatred and fear amongst others and in ourselves, that is a trap. Just yesterday when I was walking back, I was thinking in my mind that, you know how wonderful I am with all the postures, really struggling. And that really, every time, when in my self-practice I feel, today I did wonderful. In the evening, Siddhartha, you are nothing. It's like really tells me where I am, really. But yesterday, when I was just thinking about this, yesterday I really struggled. It was not an easy class, and certain postures were very difficult for me. But when I was walking back, I thought, what will happen after 10 years when I have mastered all these postures? What will happen then? Today, this experience humbles me. But when I have mastered them, then what will humble me? Then what? Then will I just allow my ego to expand and, think that, oh, I'm such a wonderful practitioner, because there will be a few people around me and I will be doing better than them, and that will give me a tremendous ego that look at these people, they cannot do these postures even for 2 minutes, and look at me, I can do it for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, what a great practitioner I am. Will that happen after 10 years? Then I thought, when I was thinking about this, you see, we use props for a particular adjustment, for a particular action. And then a moment comes when we let go of the prop, because the prop cannot always be with us, but we have to retain that action or that adjustment even without the prop. So every time now my mother tells me that how hopeless I am in my asana practice, that's a wonderful prop to bring my ego down. But she will not always do that. No teacher can always do that. Then at some point in my life, I will have to do something. I will have to do something to retain that humbleness. Also then, that would be growing beyond the prop. To retain what has been acquired with the help of a prop, and to retain it even in the absence of a prop. You see how deeply whatever we learn in our asana practice deeply informs our inner spiritual practice as well. And for me, because I studied these things first and then came to serious asana practitioner, which is like coming back to the foundations, these experiences give me very practical examples of what has to be done on a more advanced level. The same thing. So the point that I was trying to make is that anything that strengthens our identification, anything that strengthens our ego, that's a trap. Whether it is accumulated knowledge, whether it is proficiency in achieving wonderful postures, if they strengthen our identification with the body, if they strengthen our ego, if they strengthen our attachment, if they strengthen our hatred, if they strengthen our fear, then there is a trap which has to be found. And with awareness, the trap can be avoided. The only way to avoid a trap is to become aware of its presence. The moment we become aware that this is a potential trap, we have the capacity to avoid it. Just a few days ago, somebody sent me a message, because I sometimes answer messages sent to the yoga school, so somebody sent me a message. Do you also have TTC? Teachers training courses. I just answered, I'm sorry, we have only STC. Students training courses, no TTC. And then I thought, what a wonderful, perfect trap waiting for every yoga practitioner to fall into in the form of these teachers training courses, because just 100 hours, 200 hours, 500 hours, and yoga teacher. Without even practicing, at least if somebody has practiced for 7, 8, 9 years, and then falls into the trap that I'm now a yoga teacher, and cultivates that ego, it is at least justified. You know that, okay, he has worked hard, and now he has fallen into this trap. And now I'm a yoga teacher. But this 200 hours, 500 hours, 1 month, just 1 month, and this imagination is created that I am now a yoga teacher. What a perfect trap, worst trap that one can think of. Anyway, coming back to the discussion that we are having here, that the big problem that he is now faced with is that since knowledge, wisdom is a form of wealth, and wealth, if we are not aware, in the absence of awareness, strengthens our ego. Then comes, we have to think about the practice of aparigraha on a very subtle level. You know, the fifth yama, aparigraha. Parigraha, identification with the wealth, and aparigraha is lack of identification with one's wealth. There, when we usually explain aparigraha in the context of non-possessiveness, and we explain it mostly in the context of external wealth, but the same also has to be applied in the case of radiant wealth, which is knowledge. And Mahatma Gandhi had a wonderful explanation for aparigraha. He used to say somebody practicing aparigraha is like a trustee who has power over a tremendous amount of wealth, but without considering an iota of it to belong to him. That's what a trustee does. You understand trustee? We have trustees, you know, in India, such as Omkarananda Charitable Trust. This is a trust. And then you have trustees. The wealth belongs to the trust. The trustees are just appointed there to take care of it. As a trustee, you have to take care of it, but it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the trust. You cannot use it for yourself. You cannot give it to someone else. It has to be used for a very specific purpose for which it has been placed. And as a trustee, you have authority over it. To mostly, for example, for charitable trusts, for charitable work, you can use it any way you want for charitable activities. So you have tremendous power over it. But you always remember that this is not my personal wealth. This belongs to someone else, this belongs to the society, and this ultimately will go back to the society. I am just a caretaker. So aparigraha, because there also in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, the commentators make it clear that even the body is a parigraha. Even the body is a form of, is a wealth. Our senses. As caretakers, it is our duty to fully take care. Detachment from body doesn't mean that we just leave it as it is. And not take care of it. As a caretaker, it is our duty to keep it clean, to keep it healthy. But like Kabir Das ji used to say, there's a beautiful song by him, a very famous song, which is a song about a chadar. This is a chadar, something that you wear from above. So this is a chadar. And he uses this word chadar. I think it's a Persian word, chadar. It's a Persian term. And he uses this word for the body. This body is like a chadar, like a covering over this consciousness. And the whole song is about the body and its similarities with the cloth, with a piece of cloth. And ultimately he says that let me give it back to the Creator the way he gave it to me. That is what a beautiful idea, Whatever we have received from this universe, from this Creator, whatever we want to call, from this divine force, whatever, this body which we have received, to give it back as it is, without destroying it without as much. That's why this idea of taking care is extremely important. Detachment and yet also fully taking care of it. That is what we do through our asana practice. So it is this practice of aparigraha, and then his last word gives us an insight into how he, sage Triśaṅku, saves himself from this trap of knowledge. This insight which we see that he says that amṛtaḥ, I am that immortal. Now, knowledge, accumulated knowledge, is on the level of the mind. Mind is a created thing. One can never be immortal on the level of the body and on the level of the mind, intellect. So even if I have a beautiful intellect, as long as I'm identifying with that intellect, I cannot be immortal. It is only that deeper essence which is present within the intellect, which we can only grasp it as a very abstract idea, that consciousness which is present within the intellect, the consciousness which uses the intellect as a tool, the consciousness which accumulates all the information, the consciousness which uses that information as tools. That consciousness, on that level, I am immortal. Only on that level. I cannot be immortal on the physical level. I cannot be immortal on the psychological level. I can only be immortal on the level of the witness. I cannot be immortal on the level of citta, the word that Patanjali uses, on the level of the perceived. I can only be immortal on the level of the perceiver, the one that perceives everything that is being perceived. All my knowledge, all my accumulated wisdom, information, everything exists on the level of the perceived, on the level of citta. The perceiver is simply perceiving it. It is only on the level of the perceiver, it is only on the level of the pure, uninvolved witness, which witnesses both, which witnesses ignorance as well as knowledge. In most cases, it always witnesses only knowledge, never ignorance. But the wiser a person becomes, the more the witness starts witnessing ignorance. So it is that light which enlightens darkness as well as light. Do you get the point? It is that light which says, I don't know. And it is that light which also says, I know. Which knows as well as knows that it doesn't know. It enlightens its ignorance, it also enlightens. So that is what, in one of the teachings, in one of the Upanishads, there is this beautiful statement that in the imperishable, highest Brahman, which means in the infinite, there are these two, knowledge and ignorance, both are placed hidden. I'm just translating what the masters have said there. But the one that is the master of both, of ignorance as well as of knowledge, which is different from both, because it is the master of both, that is the infinite essence. And that is immortal. That is what we call the inner ruler sometimes in the Upanishads, Antaryamin, the inner ruler, which is the witness of both, the witness of knowledge and the witness of ignorance. But both of them are hidden. Ignorance is also hidden, and knowledge is also hidden. And the whole journey of yoga is to bring them out from the hiding and make them evident. See, why is ignorance hidden? Ignorance is such a darkness that when we are in it, we don't even realize that we are in it. It is only afterwards, when we have had a ray of light, that when we look back, we realize that it was darkness. In the moment of darkness, we don't realize. Only when we have someone who has experienced light can understand darkness. Someone who has never experienced light, how will he understand darkness? That is the nature of darkness. Darkness only starts revealing itself when a ray of light shines into our inner chamber. Not before that. Before that, it remains hidden. Just a few days ago, when I was sitting in my bathroom, I was looking back, and just maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago before, I was just thinking about my yoga practice and how it has benefited my life. So I was thinking about this, just about this. And suddenly this thought came to my mind that I laughed at me and said, what a perfect mess my life was before I started practicing yoga. And then the next thought was, but back then I didn't realize it. I thought my life was perfect. And if somebody would have told me that what a perfect mess your life is, I would have shouted at that person and said, my life is perfect. That is the hidden nature of ignorance. Only when we move out of it, look back, we realize that it was there. In that moment, it is very difficult, in fact impossible, to become aware of it. The more we walk into light, the more we realize how much darkness there was. And in the same way, light is also hidden. That is what the masters say, that this light of wisdom is present within each one of us. The fact that it was present within them, and just the practice of yoga brought it up to the surface. We see Triśaṅku, this experience of Triśaṅku, is a tremendous hope. Someone pierced with 3 stakes of sin that he had committed in his life, such a bad person. And yet, when he followed the path of yoga, he reached this level of experience, which means that this wisdom, these insights are deeply buried within each one of us. One just has to work. That is the point of the masters. They say that like the ghee that you eat is present within every drop of milk, but it requires a tremendous amount of effort to separate it from the milk and make it visible. In the same way, all this wisdom is present within each one of us, but it requires a tremendous amount of hard work to bring it out and to make it evident. And in that sense, when the master says that knowledge and ignorance both are hidden within this consciousness, and yet the consciousness is that which is the Lord of both, which is the witness of both, and simply because it is the Lord of both and it is the witness of both, it is different from both. And it is the realization of this difference from our accumulated knowledge is what saves us from falling into the trap of knowledge. And that is why there this word amṛta occurs. And the same word he's using here also, amṛtokṣitaḥ. There are 2 ways of explaining it. This last part of his statement, amṛtokṣitaḥ, either it can be translated as soaked with nectar, that is how translated here, Or the other possible translation is that I am immortal, indestructible, imperishable. Amṛtah means immortal, someone who has transcended death, and akṣitaḥ. Akṣitaḥ, if we separate amṛta, ukṣitaḥ, ukṣitaḥ means saturated, soaked. And if we separate akṣitaḥ, akṣitaḥ means imperishable. Akṣitaḥ means indestructible. So both translations are possible. Usually, the example that I have given so many times, and I think it is, even though it's an example, but it is not so easy to grasp, and yet it is also not so difficult to grasp, to understand what immortality means. You know, take a mirror, go into the sun, and look at the reflection of the sun in the mirror. And now ask this question, that what will happen to this reflection if the mirror breaks? What would be the answer? Tell me. What would be the answer? Tell me. This is my question to you. What will happen to the reflection in the mirror if the mirror breaks? Yes. So you cannot, neither you can say that it gets destroyed because the light still remains, nor you can say the reflection as an individual entity ceases to exist. But everything that went into that reflection, everything that created the light which was all around the mirror, that doesn't get destroyed. Now, if you ask that reflection, are you mortal or immortal? What will his answer be? Can you make the connection? If he identifies with the mirror and says that I'm just this limited, tiny little reflection which is present within the mirror, then the moment the mirror will break, the reflection will also cease to exist. Then he will say, I'm mortal. That is, then he is very justified in saying that I'm mortal. But if he identifies not with the mirror, realizes that I am that light which is around all the mirror, which is not dependent on the mirror, nothing happens to that light if the mirror breaks. The light remains as it is. Not a tiny little photon gets destroyed when the mirror gets destroyed. If the mirror, the reflection, identifies with its true nature, the light, it will say, I'm immortal. I don't care. Let the mirror break. My individual identity will cease to exist. Yes, but my true identity will always remain. The example that the masters give, which just came to my mind now, is even an easier example. When this river flows into the ocean, it ceases to exist. But does a single drop of water get destroyed? Simply the individual name and form, it ceases to be Ganga anymore. It ceases to be visible as a separate river. But that was a created entity. It was created from the ocean, and it flows back into the ocean. Each and every drop of that river came from the ocean and went back into the ocean. So as long as if you ask Ganga that are you immortal or mortal, if she identifies with that limited form, however big it may be, still it is limited. It has two sides. As long as she identifies with that, she will say, I get destroyed the moment I enter the ocean. because then I will have no separate identity. So as long as we stick to that separate identity, we fear of losing ourselves. The moment we have detached ourselves from that separate identity, then the river Ganga will realize that not a single drop of mine will get destroyed, just flowing back into the cause. And that is when she will realize that I am immortal. There is nothing that can destroy me. Just that limited identity is what gets destroyed. And that limited identity is what we call ego. That should be destroyed before. Then a person becomes Buddha. And then he doesn't die. Then he just nirvana. Just there was a form and he becomes completely formless. That's all. Nothing changes. For a Buddha, for a yogi, for someone like Patanjali, nothing changes at the moment of death. Nothing changes. So it is this realization of Triśaṅku when he says that I am amṛtah, I am immortal. When he ceases to identify with that limited identity, which will be destroyed anyway. If we don't detach ourselves, it will happen at the moment of death. That limited identity will cease to exist. And if you don't believe me, just go into some of the graveyards, look at those names, and think that these people have lived 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years. Everything that is so important for us today was equally important to them. Everything was equally important to them. And yet, here they are, with no identity left. And even that little bit of identity is just this, what the Buddha used to call, that grasping at the identity. We want to grasp at that identity for a while. Ultimately, even that, how long will a grave remain? 100, 200, 500 years after then, nobody remains even to come and weep there. Because everybody has forgotten. The identity is lost. Completely lost. And we have come from that unseen and go back ultimately into the unseen. So, it is this realization which makes him declare that I am immortal, I am indestructible, I am imperishable. The yogic journey, the journey of the meditator of the Upanishads, is from this mrityorma amṛtam gamaya, like this beautiful mantra which a pranopasaka, a meditator on the pranas, pronounces in the Upanishads, mrityur asatoma sadgamaya, take me from non-existence to existence, mrityorma amṛtam gamaya, and take me tamasoma jyotirgamaya, lead me from darkness into light, lead me from death into immortality. Darkness is death and light is immortality. Light is immortal. The most beautiful discussion on explaining this idea of immortality in the Upanishads can be found in the 10th Upanishad, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, the great Upanishad, where there is this beautiful dialogue between sage Yajnavalkya and his wife Maitreyi. He's going into the forest taking sannyasa. So what he does that he divides all his wealth. He was a very wealthy person. He had accumulated a lot of wealth, but now because he was going for higher pursuits into the forest, so he had to leave everything. So he decided to divide it half to both of his wives, Katyayani and Maitreyi. Maitreyi was his first wife and Katyayani was the second one. So he divided half and half. He gave Katyayani, she was happy with that wealth. When he wanted to give the share of Maitreyi to his first wife, she said that, oh my dear, if you are giving this wealth to me, but what is it that you are giving this wealth away to me? In what are you pursuing? You are giving away this wealth, which means that this wealth is no more meaningful to you. You are giving it to us. But what is it that you are pursuing by? She was interested more in that. And then he said, I'm in the pursuit of experiencing immortality. Then she said, can this wealth give me immortality? He said, no, it cannot. All it can do, it will give you a wonderful life like all those people who have a lot of wealth, but it cannot give you immortality. Then she says that if it cannot make me immortal, then what should I do with this? Teach me that which you are pursuing so that I can join you on that pursuit of immortality. And then he says that you have always been my beloved. And again you have said something which makes you my most beloved. Come to me, sit down, let me explain this to you. And after that, and after I have explained it, beautiful words, if we mark his words, after I have explained it, then go and experience it. Because that is what he was himself trying to do. He also knew it, and he explained it to her also. But then comes experiencing it. So knowing something is not the same as, that's why I make this always this distinction between knowledge and wisdom, between, as you explained, scholarly knowledge and experiential wisdom. They are not the same thing. One is second-hand, the second one is first-hand. One is what we receive from others, and the first one is what we allow to arise from within. So, and then he imparts the teaching of the inner immortal center of love. But that is another discussion. But that is how this idea of immortality has been developed there. So this is one meaning, that I am immortal and imperishable. The second meaning, soaked with nectar, the translation that I have taken here. But that we will discuss in our next session. Today the time is over. That meaning we will discuss. What does it mean, this to be soaked? I am soaked with nectar. And some masters, such as Shankaracharya, believe that this last part was not even pronounced by Triśaṅku himself. It was not pronounced. It was later added by the composer of this part of the text. It was later added for clarification. Because after Sumedhā, after he has acquired that beautiful intellect of understanding the essence, there remains nothing for him to use any word at all. But all this we will discuss in our next session. So we'll come back to this mantra. It's a beautiful mantra. It's really, I say this about every Shanti mantra. when I think and when I go through the Shanti mantras, they are really beautiful. Each one of them, there is so much depth in each one of them. But for several reasons, this one sticks out, particularly because of the kind of person that he is. Completely hopeless, sinner, bad, and transforms into presenting the quintessence of all the Vedic teachings, which a student of the Vedas had to repeat every day, just so to keep the goal fresh in one's understanding and awareness. That's why this was a japa mantra, a mantra for japa, daily repetition. So it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's really beautiful. Any questions, observations? Any other thoughts about immortality? How does immortality make sense? Because there were several great kings, in history who pursued immortality or utopia and all these things, because they tried to achieve it on a physical level. It never worked.
In China, we have famous empire.
Yeah. Emperor, yes.
Triśaṅku.
Okay.
He united the 6 kingdoms of
Kingdoms,
China.
yeah.
Then he want to, because he think, I'm the best.
Yeah.
So now I want to pursue immortality.
Immortality, yes.
Then he sent 800 virgins to Japan to find the pill
For
to eat for
immortality.
But finally, he still died.
He still died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, because on the level of the body, on the level of the mind, it's just against the nature. When this whole universe is created and is bound to be destroyed, then how anything else in this universe can continue to exist?
but he left the very like a miracle his tomb.
Mm-hmm.
His tomb.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He built so many, the soldier, life soldier and house. He just pour the nut, so become like a statue.
Okay.
Buried in his tomb.
So all these statues which we see,
So
okay.
very light and every face different. So
Every face is
lovely.
very different, yes.
And he put a lot of what's the name? To measure the temperature.
Yeah.
With the metal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that metal which they use. Mercury, yes.
He put mercury, built a lot of tunnel. So he think it's the river because he think when I eat the pill, I will reverse. I will come back to this world again. So my soldier still be my soldier, and the tunnel, the mercury still my river, and defend my country.
Okay.
So he make everything ready for his rebirth.
For his
But
rebirth. But I think that is where the teaching of anatta, because when the Buddha says that this holding to even a little bit of, something that continues is ultimately the source of all suffering. And in that sense, this really helps me understand anatta, because this word anatta, you would be amazed, it's not only the Buddha, also the Upanishads use the word anatmya in Sanskrit. And Patanjali also uses this word. But there, the word atman is a very specific significance. And yeah, I think this is what makes it very clear that even clinging to a little bit of, continuation of this limited identity in some way or the other, that is what the Buddha saw as the greatest cause of suffering. And so, if that king he was trying to cling a little bit to that limited identity. And then we always hope for. We just always continue to hope. We continue to put our hope into the future. Whether most of the religions, they put the hope into the future, that after such and such amount of years, something will happen. But for something to happen now, in this very moment, that hope has to be broken. And that complete hopelessness is what anatta is about. If one understands anatta deeply, it's a deep idea. And there is so much confusion, particularly amongst Advaita Vedantins, where everything is about Atman, and the Mahayana Buddhists, where everything is about negating Atman. And the funny thing is that both are using the same, simply because both are using the same word for two very distinct things. Both of them are saying the same thing. But they are using, simply because they have used one word for two very separate terms, that is why all the confusion arises. And so much misunderstanding and acquires between these two traditions. But I think anybody who has gone a little bit into the depth, whether someone who has reached the transverbal depth of Mahayana Buddhist teachings or of Advaita Vedanta Buddhist teaching, Advaita Vedantic teachings, he will very easily see that both of them are stating exactly the same thing.
From my understanding, I feel it's
exactly the same thing. Exactly, yes. Yes.
So break the cycle of samsara.
Of samsara, same thing here.
So exactly
same thing here. Completely same thing here. Any other? Yes, please.
What is the purpose of the asana in the higher pursuit of the...
Okay, what is the purpose of asana in the higher pursuit? The purpose of asana, first of all, is there's so many purposes. As a preparation for pranayama, as a preparation for meditation. The capacity to meditate comes only, how can the mind be stable if the body is not stable? So the greatest purpose of asana practice is to render the body stable, so that the breath within the body can become stable, and then the mind can become stable, and then the understanding, because to be able to focus, to be able to be attentive, we have to bring stability into our life. So as a preparation, and we also see asana as a door into the internal world, because by working with our body, it helps us to draw back our attention from the world out there by allowing it to be focused on something within our body. In this way, it becomes a door also to enter within. So there are so many purposes that are achieved by practicing asana. Depending on the approach that we have with our asana practice. It gives us tremendous insight into our body, the kind of insight that anatomy cannot give, because anatomy gives insight. It's a very different kind of insight. It is an insight which you acquire by dissecting dead bodies. But what about this living body? I cannot dissect this body. This is a first-hand experience of my body. And by understanding, by acquiring deeper insights into the body, it opens the door for acquiring deeper insights into other faculties which are within the body, which are the senses, which are manas, buddhi, ego, faculty of memory, all these different faculties which are deeply interconnected. So asana is very much the door. I think that is why every tradition, every mystical tradition in India has retained this practice. We see the Buddha sitting in particular postures. Some historians have casted a doubt on this, whether it is a fact or not. But several writers of the biography of Krishnamacharya have stated that Krishnamacharya received his deeper understanding of asana, in fact, from Tibet. It's in his life. Some historians question it. That's a different thing. But even if you go today, I have never been to Lhasa myself, but in Tibet there is either in the Potala Palace or somewhere around it, there is a monastery where you see they call frescoes, or wall ancient, like 500, 600, 700 years old, where you can see all the different asanas, all the different postures there. So it was very much part of Tibetan culture. So asanas in India as well. You see also in Rajasthan, there is a very ancient temple where on the ceiling you find most of these paintings have now been destroyed, but still some are there. And there is even a video of that interior on YouTube where you can see all the different asanas being painted on a temple in Rajasthan. So the point that I was trying to make is that when it comes to the very practical step of experiencing everything that we are talking about, asana to me seems one of the most important practical steps as a preparation for pranayama and meditation. I don't see how any deep practice of pranayama, which is then essential for meditation, can take place without practicing asana. And if it happens, you see, the book that you gave to me, for example, by that Zen master, he beautifully explains, because he did not study asanas, but he had to experiment for years together before he found the perfect posture in which he could meditate, isn't it? And it's one of the best practical books on learning how to, because he's a teacher who speaks about his failures, about his errors, about his mistakes. That's what makes him beautiful. Not all the beautiful things.
It's very technical, and
it's very
chapters where he goes through of saying like this and this.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Diagrams and charts.
Exactly. So whenever we speak of Zen, we just speak of those koan, those beautiful stories like the stories he told. But what has led to those stories? Beautiful story, last time I took 1 hour to explain. For him, that story explained everything just in 1 minute. He pours tea and the tea starts overflowing. And the message for the student is clear. He has already so much knowledge in him that the master cannot teach him anything anymore unless he starts emptying himself. Those are such beautiful message through such simple stories. But what have led the Zen masters to reach there, that no one sees. That is where asana comes into the picture. So there are so many ways of explaining. That's a very different subject, topic. One can speak for hours on listing all the benefits, physical, psychological, spiritual, deep inner benefits of asana practice. It's, as a tool, an extremely beneficial tool.
You mentioned something in the last class about the difference of the stretching of the body and asana.
Yes.
So asana is to settle down.
Exactly.
In the space, no?
To use that stretching of the body, in fact, yes. That.
Because then an image
Yes.
of the monk in very deep meditation, but like
Yeah,
comes to me, no?
yeah.
But this is asana.
But if he's like that, he's not in meditation. He must hold it. Because I saw
This
the
is
monk,
this option, no? I think.
if they really
If he is an extremely, extremely advanced practitioner, then it is possible. But it requires usually everywhere that I see people sitting in meditation sessions, I'm sorry to say 90% of them are sleeping. And you see them like this. So it's very clear that they are sleeping. And it's just tamas. It's just tamas. Very honestly, But I don't deny, because we see the Buddha also in reclining postures, sometimes also shavasana. You see, even in shavasana a person can have, but then you are lying down there. Now it depends what I am doing. That depends on me. Only I can decide whether I was sleeping or whether I was fully aware, attentive, with my breath, with my body. And yet from outside, both seem the same. Except, yes, the sound that sometimes comes out from a sleeping. But even that, Have you ever experienced hearing your own snoring? So the body could be sleeping and yet you could be awake. Even that is possible. So somebody might hear you snoring and thinking that he's sleeping, but still, who knows? Externally it cannot be judged. Who knows? Maybe he's just enjoying his snoring.
Also, I think often about it's very easy to get very identified with the body.
Yes, that's what I said. I was talking about, it can be a trap. It can be a trap. That's why I took it a little bit in a detail. And for most of the yoga teachers, without a deeper understanding, it becomes a trap. It does.
Even sadhana.
Yeah, even sadhana, everything that we do, every tool, every prop that we use, I said, it can become a trap the moment it starts feeding our ego instead of destroying it, instead of chiseling away a little bit of it. If it starts strengthening then it becomes a trap. And every tool that we use to chisel away that ego a little bit, in the absence of awareness, if we are not aware, if we don't use the tool skillfully, then rather than chipping away from that ego, it starts strengthening it.
So even religion,
everything is a problem. Exactly. That's the point. When we said the last insight, the deepest insight, even that was just a prop. Then everything coming before that is a prop. But that doesn't mean that we throw away the prop. We use it. We use the boat to reach the other side. And we use it till we have reached there. If we abandon it before we have actually reached, then also we will either drown or we will have to swim. So that's, you have to decide.
Maybe this way, like the mat can be like, for me, it's like a preparation to being asana. I mean, asana is out of the mat.
Yes.
Like asana is used for preparation.
Yes.
Daily life.
One of my teachers used to say that this mat is only a safe course where you can learn driving your car. You need a safe space so that you don't hit anybody or anything. So you just have a big space, big enough where you can start. But you don't continue to drive your car in that safe space all your life. At some point you have to get out. You have to drive in the traffic. You have to drive in the hills. You have to drive everywhere. So this yoga mat is just that safe space, just to experiment. Once we become confident, then that yoga mat has to be left.
So then asana is very related with behavior, no?
Yes.
The body.
Yes, that's all. To learn the proper behavior, to put the positive samskaras and clean away the negative samskaras. Like there are samskaras in our mind, there are also samskaras in our body. Tendencies which have developed over the years out of ignorance. Let us replace them by learning the proper thing and then making that proper thing a tendency, but then also not getting attached to that tendency. A balance, both sides. Otherwise, in ignorance, I see this with myself. All these because we always sat on the ground, always the same tendency to sit in the same way. Now I have to unlearn it so that it becomes balanced. So asana makes us aware of ourselves. Anyway. Let us... Mystery. That's the mystery. So we will conclude with the prayer of universal well-being, because that's ultimately where all these have to lead us to. Selfless love, friendship, compassion towards all beings, the only desire that everyone may be happy. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्। ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः विश्वशान्तिः। Thank you very much.
Thank you.